what freaked me out is that outside of the mathematics of making a sine curve, the actual result of a computer back then was pretty stupid. There was no difference between the real world and the virtual world.
Earl Hall, thank you so much for being on my show. How are you?
Good, and how about you?
I am doing just fine. Where are you talking to right now? Where are you talking from right now?
I am in the beautiful city of Las Vegas, Nevada, USA.
Las Vegas, Nevada. And what are you doing in Las Vegas, Nevada?
I'm building an artificial intelligence company. We've been at it for almost 10 years right now. We pick up data out of slot machines from about 50 countries right now. And our goal with that data is to bring forward algorithms for anti-money laundering, to cure responsible gaming. And with COVID, we're doing a lot of things in the cashless world. So we've been at this for a long while. We're not really a startup.
So, Earl, this is a fascinating industry, and it's particularly fascinating to me because I know nothing about it. So, aside from the fact that I enjoy the occasional trip with friends, and I myself am more of a poker guy, but first I have to go back a little bit, and you have a long history with technology, not just AXES.ai, but all the way, I'd love to go back to your growing up, and you just mentioned you had a pretty fascinating take on your interaction with computers. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, I grew up in a very small place. It's a little tiny island right out in the North Atlantic in Canada called Newfoundland, or Newfoundland as we call it at home.
Like Come From Away, from the musical.
Yes, but exactly that. Not far from where I was born, actually. And the issue was, one, I was very blessed that even though we were in a small place, a relatively modest place, we did have computers in school back in the early 1980s.
Wow.
But what freaked me out is that outside of the mathematics of making a sine curve, the actual result of a computer back then was pretty stupid. There was no difference between the real world and the virtual world. And that's really what I didn't like as I graduated through computers, went into the army. And then, just to talk about the army, I saw the intelligence that we were using back then to keep a tank's muzzle pointed towards the target. And that's where my heart started to beat. This. If you can keep the muzzle straight while the vehicle is moving, then I started looking at how artillery was projecting, getting into precision. And then my heart started to beat for artificial intelligence.
Wow. So
then I said, okay,
wait, you said
we can, yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Already back then you were thinking about artificial intelligence.
I don't want to, we've come up with all of these buzzwords now that are okay, but the thing is for me, it's predictability. Right. If you look at the human psyche, we have two things that keep us out of the present moment. We have fear of reproducing the past,
sure,
or regret from the past, or we have things from the past giving us fear that are predicting negative things of the future. Sure. And that's really the way the animal brain works. That's the way we get all polluted with cortisol and things inside of our brain. So for me back then, I didn't have the word artificial intelligence until really the movie Matrix that I worked on with my team in special effects for movies. But for me, the word was predictability. How are they predicting keeping that straight with everything that's going on? And that's when mathematics really started to make my heart beat.
So mathematics make your heart beat. Give me a couple sentences about MIT, Matrix. What's that all about?
Well, I was working in a company. I was building a company that was doing some very advanced scanning of human bodies to be able to move them into the virtual world. Wow. And then morph them onto wireframes so we could do animation. And when I actually understood what the movie The Matrix was trying to project as an artificial intelligence world, saying, Warning, red flag. I went, oh my God, okay, good. Now I get it. And at the same time, I was recruited to teach at the master's degree level in management of information.
Wow.
So I'll be honest, now that it's a long time ago, I used to use my students as guinea pigs to do all kinds of papers on things that were edge back then,
Wow.
to try to get food into my brain to understand where the world was going. Predictability.
So how do you end up in the gaming industry? You're now talking to me from Las Vegas, and I'd love to in a second dive into what is the gaming industry, what is anti-money laundering, and why, and what is the role of AI within the gaming industry. But before that, how do you make that transition?
I was in a totally different world. I was actually in a totally different part of the world. And I got approached by one of the large accounting firms that a company in the gaming space was going bankrupt because of the fact that they had a lot of patents, a lot of potential, but they'd ran out of cash and they needed to be restructured. So I was parachuted in to restructure that. And I'll be honest, I'd never been in a casino in my entire life.
Wow. Up to that point, of
And
course.
picked up the company, fixed it. It ended up getting sold. And towards the end, before it got sold, I got asked by a very prestigious shareholder that's one of my mentors, please come help me build this company that I have here. And when
Okay.
I saw what he was doing, I was completely in trouble because it was the intersection of all of my dreams. Big data, wouldn't be able to do it without blockchain. And it was 100% taking me in the direction where I wanted to go, of building an app store to be able to welcome any app in the planet onto the big data. And all of that was fueling my vision to get towards AI. So my mentor actually rolled out a red carpet for me to live my tech dream.
Okay, so you're now finding yourself in Las Vegas in the gaming space. Give me a little bit of context because I know very little about the gaming space, let alone Las Vegas, and I'm sure that a lot of my friends also, while we may enjoy it from time to time, we don't really understand this ecosystem of what's happening there. So give me a little bit of background.
Well, we're kind of a stranger to the entire industry because the industry was brought up on slot machines and table games.
Mm-hmm.
And data was largely localized inside of all of the casinos. Back in the old days, it was because of trust issues, and today it's largely because of technology issues. So we showed up out of the blue with a vision that was very much years ahead of everybody else by saying, we've got to get all of the data out and get it into the cloud so that we can manage performance, we can manage KYC, we can manage regulatory issues. But at the same time, our job is to bring in things that can cure and advance the industry.
So what does that mean? Cure and advance it of, so for cured of what, and what does it mean to advance the gaming industry?
Well, there are a lot of places around the world that still have legitimacy issues with gaming, where there's two things: either it's a safe haven for crime, or it's a potential area where addiction can infiltrate in.
Mm-hmm.
So most people don't see that gaming can bring in those things, but I can tell you, I travel almost 100 countries for this project I'm building, and you see a lot of crazy stuff around the world. A
A
lot.
hundred countries.
Yep.
A
And you see a
hundred
lot of
countries.
crazy stuff. Yep. Well, over 100, but I round it down to 100. So the thing is that what's driving our passion is that we can actually bring in a little bit of light into some dark spaces. Like when you hook in our system into a jurisdiction, into a place, into a casino, the money laundering is in a lot of trouble because we trace every single click, every single movement, every single change. And our algorithms are monitoring anything that's outside of the normal.
Wow.
So if somebody is in there trying to launder money, we pick them up in a heartbeat.
Wow. So what have you seen happen around the world as you're putting in as you're putting in these, these technologies? Give me a little bit of the insight over there.
Well, one of the things, I guess, is like any consumer-based industry. Like, if you read any of the stuff that Walmart's been putting out over the years, that the greatest threat to theft in a Walmart is usually employees. Well, it goes without saying that one of the greatest threats inside of the casino industry is collusion between an employee and an outside force.
Sure.
Like I've seen in Guatemala, unfortunately, that organized crime actually were threatening with bodily harm employees inside of a casino. That if they weren't helping them rig the cards on a baccarat game, that members of their family would be hurt or even worse.
Wow. So this is a little bit different also from the, the classic movie 21 that we're all familiar with, where it's, genius mathematicians counting cards. There, it sounds like the whole the money laundering industry within gaming industry is a little bit more complicated than that.
It's a lot more complicated, and it's very invisible because of the fact that it's getting very sophisticated,
Sure.
which means that if you have a server, you have an information management system that's in one casino and there's a different one in another one, well, the money launderers and the card counters on the blackjack side, they will just dabble in different places so that they're so far under the radar of what any algorithm inside of a one lone silo place could offer in terms of intelligence, richness, big data, micro data sets. You'll never find them. But when you're running big data algorithms like the algorithms we have, we start by running them over the whole planet. So they're running over 50 countries.
Wow.
Then we bring them down into regional. Then we bring them down into micro algorithms. So as I'm sure you know, there's a big difference between big data and micro data. We do both because you have to catch them wherever they're trying to cheat the data.
Right. And so walk me through the process of catching somebody who's trying to cheat the data. So
Oh, that's not our job. I stay away from that.
no, not the physical,
Because they'll
but
come after me and bury me. All we do is we get a flagged transaction that says this transaction looks suspecting, and the email goes off to the appropriate person, and that
what could be a
person,
trigger of that though? So could that be that they're winning an unexpected amount of money
oh, they
that
don't want to win. They don't want to win. What they want to do is cash in money, play a little bit so that the unclean money goes into a legitimate machine.
right,
You play a little bit and then you take it back out so that it becomes a legitimate amount of money
right.
because it's been cashed into that environment. Then you might see in sophisticated places where they'll move to one machine to another to bring down the actual amount that they're going to cash out. There's several different models, I'd like to call it, but it's
Wow.
all the same thing. It's trying to move money out of a legitimate source into a legitimate system.
Wow. So now that AXES.ai have been around for about 10 years and you're operating in 50 countries, how big is the problem today? How big is cheating in casinos today?
I'm not going to say it's alarming because of the fact that a lot of the countries that were behind in technology are now leaping forward in technology. Like if you look at Mexico, which was really a place that needed to be cleaned up very bad about 15 years ago, when you look at it today, it's using cashless technology, it's using all kinds of algorithms,
Oh, wow.
it's really taking leaps forward. The problem is not what I'd like to say a 911 in the language we use here in the United States, but it's a serious problem that has to be dealt with on a global level. That's the reason why I'm a big fan of a cashless society, because
Right.
if you can't move dirty money into a clean space, well, you can only be inside of a clean environment.
And I know that you're also pretty involved with blockchain in general, so I assume that the passion for that it comes from a similar understanding, right?
Well, it's because AI is dependent on the integrity of the data it's using. If you can manipulate the data, if you can skew the data, if you can delete the data, your algorithm is actually corrupt
Right.
without you knowing it.
100%.
Whereas if you're using any form of blockchain, whether it be centralized or decentralized blockchain, I really don't care. You're saying that the security and the integrity of the data is the underlying food that you're feeding the algorithms.
Definitely.
That's
Definitely.
why AI without blockchain for me is kind of like, yeah, whatever.
When you started out AXES.ai and you're trying to build these models that are looking at the gaming industry, and I can only imagine, because you go into a casino, there's so many different types of machines, so many different types of behaviors that could happen, and it's really a fascinating realm from a psychological aspect. But do you have to onboard people that are specialized in gaming, or they're simply great engineers, and and you're explaining to them how the gaming industry works? Because you yourself you're not, it doesn't sound like you're a really gamer by heart, right?
No, I'm not. And I'll say that I've been blessed at Access because when I look at my whole team around the world and the different offices we have, I'm surrounded by geniuses. Whether they like gaming or not is no bearing on what we do, because the second blessing of any leader, and I'm going to say this for the startups, not for the large mega companies on the Dow or whatever, but if you're smart enough as a leader, you'll let your clients teach you.
Mm-hmm.
My first sentence that I always give to my clients is, hey, I don't know your business. And I'll be honest, I'll probably never know it as good as you do. So if you teach me what you need to teach me so that I can protect you and give you tools to go bigger, better, faster, I said, we'll have a great marriage together. So we do have people on our team that know gaming, but that's not the heart of who we are. Who we are is listening to our clients and following them on their path.
What does a casino look like in 5-10 years, given that we go back to in-person entertainment and all of that?
You've just hit it on the nose. Online gaming is becoming the staple for somebody who wants to spin a virtual slot machine for 10 minutes and win, lose, or whatever, doesn't matter. But at the end of the day, a casino is really a gathering point for entertainment.
Right.
Even in the smallest little casinos that I've been in Africa or in the Philippines or anywhere else, there's always an intersection between food, between social, between playing that 20, 40, 60, $80 that you have in your pocket.
Right.
And I'll always believe that bricks and mortar are going to be around forever, because as COVID has shown us, everybody ran home in March and goes, yes, work from home. Then the personality types started to emerge between May, June, July, and we realized some people need to be in a social environment all the time. Some people don't want to be in a social environment anytime. But the majority, the 60% that are living on the top of the bell curve,
Right.
they need to be in a social environment some of the time, all the time.
Earl, this is all fascinating. Before we leave, a last question, because we talked about it just briefly before. Talk to me a little bit about neuroscience, AI, something that you're particularly excited or scared about. Give me, your 1 or 2 minute brief about your understanding of neuroscience and AI and where you're in it.
Well, I'm dug in deep to the relation between the pituitary gland and the pineal gland. Why? Because the pituitary gland is really the seat of the animal brain, and the pineal gland is really the seat of the human brain. And they're constantly in conflict between fight and flight and trying to find that Zen moment where you're inspired to really be who you are.
Right.
And the more that I looked at technology over the last 20 years, I realized that the only way to understand artificial intelligence or enhanced intelligence is to understand the difference between the lower and the higher brain.
Sure.
So I started to dig in, and I dug in for personal reasons. I lived a very traumatic event in my personal life with my son, and I set out on a journey to fix what I broke with my son. And that just led me in a direction that was so beautiful, because today, when I look forward, I see the human, I see information technology, I see the intersection, and I'm putting back on my warrior suit to make sure that I'm on the right side of this fight.
I just love it, Earl. This was so insightful and so inspiring. Thank you for taking the time to do this. Before we leave, I have to ask you for 3 words that you would use to describe yourself.
Inspiring others to be themselves.
Inspiring others to be themselves.
I think it's the hardest thing a human has to figure out. It's to learn how to be and trust themselves. So
100%.
that's really a big part of my job, sticking the mirror in my team's faces and making them realize how absolutely beautiful they really are.
Earl, thank you very, very much. This is just wonderful. Continue doing good for the world, and stay safe and stay healthy.
Thank you very much for the invite. I absolutely love what you're doing. Congratulations.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.